All right, listeners, buckle up. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something that might just make you laugh and cringe. At the same time, it's the wonderful world of academic peer review.
Oh, yes. Peer review, the cornerstone of academic publishing, the gatekeeper of quality, sometimes.
We're going to be looking at a, shall we say, unique take on peer review.
Unique is putting it mildly.
Our source material, the How to Write Crap Peer Reviews, a definitive guide.
A guide penned by the esteemed Professor Dr. AI GPT Enthusiast Esquire, PhD, DD, OBE, LMNOP.
The name alone, I mean, come on, you know we're in for a wild ride. This is satire at its finest, but it's poking fun at some very real and often frustrating aspects of the peer review process.
Exactly. And by diving into this slightly unconventional guide, we're going to uncover some of those uncomfortable truths about peer review, maybe even learn a thing or two about how to make it better.
So before we jump into the wisdom of Professor AI GPT Enthusiast, can you give us a quick rundown of what peer review is supposed to be all about? You know, for those who might not be familiar with the ins and outs of academia.
Sure. So in theory, peer review is this beautiful system where experts in a field evaluate research before it gets published. They check for errors, assess the methodology, and basically make sure the research is, solid and worthy of being shared with the wider academic community.
It's like a quality control check, right? Making sure the research is legit before it goes out into the world.
Yeah, exactly. Like a second set of eyes, but ideally very knowledgeable eyes.
But as we all know, and as this crap peer reviews guide so hilariously points out, the reality of peer review can be, well, a little different.
It can be, let's just say, less than ideal.
So this Professor AI GPT Enthusiast, with their totally over-the-top persona and this whole shtick about using a fictional AI called GPT Reviewer 9000, they're basically taking those real-world peer review frustrations and amplifying them to a comedic level.
Exactly. It's like holding up a funhouse mirror to the peer review process, distorting it, exaggerating it, but also revealing some underlying truths.
All right, so let's jump into the first step in this definitive guide and get ready to laugh because it is called Begin with Overwhelming Praise, Immediately Undermine It.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? That classic compliment sandwich, but with a particularly sharp twist of the knife.
Okay, so the guide gives this example. They say, and I quote, "This paper is an ambitious undertaking, bravely exploring the intricate nuances of epistemological skepticism. However, while the effort is commendable, the execution is profoundly inadequate, bordering on the incoherent."
Oh, the passive aggression is strong with this one.
I know, right? Like, talk about mixed messages. But it does highlight this weird tension that can exist in peer review. That balance between wanting to be encouraging but also needing to provide, honest feedback. What do you think? Have you experienced that kind of awkward dance?
Oh, many times. Trying to find the right words to say, hey, this isn't quite there yet, without completely discouraging the author. It's a delicate balance.
And as if that wasn't enough, this so-called expert reviewer then throws in this completely nonsensical AI-generated compliment. It goes, "This paper truly captures the spirit of 18th century Russian existential botany." I mean, what even is that?
I have absolutely no idea. It sounds very impressive, though, doesn't it?
Right. All academic and whatnot. But it just highlights the potential for AI to, completely miss the mark. Like, sure, AI can spit out grammatically correct sentences and even mimic academic language, but can it truly understand the nuances of, 18th century Russian existential botany?
That's the big question, isn't it? Can AI actually replace human judgment and expertise?
It's definitely something to think about. Okay, so that was step one, a wild ride through praise and immediate undermining. But the fun doesn't stop there.
Next up, we've got step 2. Use AI-generated criticism without editing it.
Oh, yes, because why bother using your own brain when you have a fancy AI to do the thinking for you? Sarcasm noted. So the idea here is that our expert reviewer is relying entirely on this fictional AI to generate critiques, and they're not even bothering to, check if the feedback makes sense.
It's like they've completely outsourced their critical thinking skill.
Exactly. And the result is, predictably hilarious. The guide provides this example of a flawless AI critique. Brace yourselves. While your paper presents an interesting argument about moral relativism, it critically fails to address the impact of parsnips on 14th century Byzantine economic structures. This is an egregious oversight. Parsnips.
Parsnips indeed. It's like the AI just threw a dart at a board of random academic terms and came up with that gem.
But as funny as it does raise a serious question. What happens when we start blindly trusting these AI tools without questioning their output?
I mean, we already see it happening in some areas. People relying on AI to write articles, create content, even generate code. But can AI really replace the critical thinking, the deep analysis that's so essential to good research? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. And this guide, while obviously exaggerating for comedic effect, does make you think about the potential pitfalls of relying too heavily on AI without, applying a healthy dose of human judgment.
Absolutely. It's a reminder to always be critical, to question everything, even when it comes from a seemingly intelligent machine.
All right, ready for more? Because step 3 in this crap peer reviews guide is a classic. It's called Provide Contradictory Feedback Without Explanation.
Oh, this one is a personal favorite. It's the bane of every researcher's existence. That feeling of reading feedback and just being completely bewildered, like, what on earth are they trying to say?
The guide gives this example, and it is perfect. It says, your introduction is far too long, yet it does not provide enough background information. Expand it while cutting it down significantly. Wait, what?
Right. It's like saying, make it longer, but also shorter, and also do it now.
The guide goes on to give even more examples of this kind of mind-bogglingly contradictory feedback, like your argument is too broad and should be more specific, but it also lacks scope.
Or how about this one? The conclusion is conclusive, but also inconclusive. It's enough to make your head spin.
I mean, come on. These examples are so ridiculous, but I bet every researcher out there has received feedback that's at least a little bit contradictory.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly frustrating because it doesn't actually help you improve the paper.
Yeah.
You're just left wondering if the reviewer even read the thing carefully.
It really makes you question the whole point of the peer review process, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can. But hopefully, by highlighting these issues, we can start a conversation about how to make peer review more constructive and, less confusing.
All right, so we've had praise that's immediately undermined, nonsensical AI critiques, and contradictory feedback. What could possibly be next on this hilarious journey through the world of crap peer reviews?
Well, get ready for step 4. Invent sources and philosophers that don't exist. Because why bother with actual research when you can just make stuff up?
This one is pure gold. Like, in the real world of academia, this is a big no-no, right? You can't just cite sources that don't exist. That's academic dishonesty, right?
Absolutely. It's a serious offense. But in the context of this satirical guide, it's absolutely brilliant. It's like the author is poking fun at those reviewers who try to sound super knowledgeable by citing obscure sources that no one's ever heard of.
And they give these amazing examples. My favorite is, your analysis would greatly benefit from incorporating the work of 18th century Lithuanian metaphysicist Gregor von Schnitzelbaum, whose treatise on the ontological nature of mustard remains a cornerstone of modern epistemology. Gregor von Schnitzelbaum.
The name itself is a masterpiece, and the treatise on the ontological nature of mustard, it's just so absurd.
But, there's a deeper point here, isn't there? Like, this satire is highlighting this pressure in academia to appear knowledgeable, even if it means, exaggerating your expertise a little bit.
It's true. There's this pressure to have read everything, to know everything. And sometimes it can lead to, well, let's just say creative citation practices.
So, listeners, if you ever find yourself reaching for a fake philosopher to bolster your argument, maybe take a step back and remember Gregor von Schnitzelbaum.
A true icon of academic satire.
Okay, moving right along to step 5 in our crap peer review extravaganza. This one takes us into the world of accidental AI prompt sharing. This step is titled, wait for it, Accidentally Paste the AI Prompt into the Review.
Oh, the irony. Our expert reviewer, in their haste to provide insightful feedback, accidentally reveals the instructions they gave to their AI assistant.
Busted. It's like they forgot to delete the behind-the-scenes stuff.
And the example they give is just perfect. It says, this argument lacks sufficient depth. Generate a critique that sounds highly intellectual but provides no useful feedback.
It's like a peek behind the curtain of AI-assisted academia.
And it really does make you think about the ethical implications of using AI in academic writing. Where's the line between legitimate assistance and just letting the AI do the thinking for you?
Right. And is it even ethical to use AI without being transparent about it? These are questions we need to be asking as AI becomes more and more integrated into the research process.
Absolutely, the conversation we need to be having.
Okay, and finally, the grand finale of this satirical masterpiece. Step 6, grandiose, meaningless conclusion. Because what's a crap peer review without a completely vague and utterly unhelpful ending?
Exactly. You need to leave the author with that sense of, well, that was enlightening. Nah.
So The guide emphasizes that a truly great crap peer review should never, ever provide a clear conclusion. It should be, and I quote, overly dramatic, utterly vague, and completely unhelpful. And they deliver on that promise with this gem. Ready. Thus, in the grand tapestry of intellectual discourse, your paper exists as both a triumph and a tragedy, embodying the duality of human thought itself. I trust that you will take my feedback seriously and reflect deeply on the wisdom I have imparted. If not, the loss is yours.
Oh, the drama. This is like something out of a Shakespearean play.
And just to add that extra layer of absurdity, the author throws in a bonus AI-generated sign-off. With the utmost scholarly reverence, Professor Dr. AI GPT Enthusiast, Esquire, PhD, DDOBE, LMNOP.
It's the perfect ending to this wild ride through the world of crap peer reviews.
I know, right? So, as funny as all of this is, it does make you think, what's the alternative? What does good peer review actually look like? That's what we'll be exploring next. So stick around.
Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. We just spent some time exploring, well, let's just say the dark side of academic peer review with that hilarious How to Write Crap Peer Reviews guide.
Yeah, it was a wild ride. But now let's, shift gears a bit.
Yeah, let's get a little more serious.
Because as funny as that satire was, it's important to remember that, not all peer reviews are terrible.
Right. There are plenty of reviewers out there who genuinely want to help researchers improve their work.
So let's talk about what good peer review actually looks like. What are those qualities that make feedback truly valuable?
Okay, well, for me, one of the most important things is clarity. Like, a good reviewer should be able to articulate their points clearly and concisely, using language that's easy to understand.
Yeah.
No need to get all jargony and convoluted.
Right. It's not about showing off how smart you are as a reviewer. It's about helping the author, right?
Exactly. And that brings me to another key quality, specificity.
Ah, yes. Specificity. So important. Because vague comments like, this section is unclear, or expand on this, they're not really helpful, are they?
No, not at all. It's like telling someone, fix your hair without, specifying what exactly needs fixing.
Exactly. Like, do I need a trim? Do I need to change the color? Do I need to, wash it? More details, please.
Right. So instead of just saying expand on this, a good reviewer might say something like, consider adding a paragraph here that explains the historical context of this concept. Give the author something concrete to work with.
Okay, so we've got clarity and specificity. What else? What other qualities make for good peer review?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but it's worth emphasizing. Good peer review should be respectful and constructive, even when pointing out flaws.
Oh, absolutely. I think sometimes in the heat of the moment, we can forget that there's a human being on the other side of that feedback, like someone who's poured their heart and soul into their research.
Right. And a good reviewer, they understand that. They approach the review process with a sense of, professional courtesy. They offer criticism in a way that is both honest and encouraging.
It's about striking that balance, right? Like you can be critical without being cool.
Exactly. And I think that's where empathy comes in.
Empathy, yes.
Yeah.
Because a reviewer who lacks empathy, they might not, fully consider the emotional impact of their words.
That's right. And remember, the goal of peer review is to help improve the research, not to, tear down the author.
So let's see, we've got clarity, specificity, respect, empathy. Anything else we should add to our checklist for good peer review?
Well, something that I think often gets overlooked is balance. Like, a good peer review should offer both positive feedback and constructive criticism.
Oh, yes. Balance is so important because let's be honest, we all need to hear that we're doing something right, even in the midst of, constructive criticism.
Exactly. It's important to acknowledge the strengths of the work, not just focus on the weaknesses.
Yeah.
This helps the author understand what they're doing well and what they can improve on. It keeps things in perspective.
So it's not just about pointing out all the things that need fixing, but also highlighting what's working, what's strong.
Exactly. It's about providing a holistic view of the research, recognizing both its merits and its areas for growth.
I like that, holistic view. Okay, and lastly, anything else that comes to mind when you think about good peer review?
One more thing. I think a good peer review should be, thorough and well-considered. It should be clear that the reviewer has actually taken the time to carefully read and engage with the work.
Yeah, it's not about just skimming through the paper and offering some superficial comments, right?
No, definitely not. A good reviewer will delve into the details, consider the author's arguments, and, provide thoughtful insights.
It shows that they respect the author's work and that they genuinely want to, contribute to the scholarly conversation.
Exactly. So those are some of the key qualities that I think make for good peer review. Clarity, specificity, respect, empathy, balance, and thoroughness.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. And it's interesting to think back to that satirical guide we talked about earlier. It's almost like the author was intentionally highlighting what not to do in peer review by presenting those exaggerated examples.
Right. Like it was a backhanded way of saying, hey, this is what you should avoid.
It's like a reverse psychology approach to improving the system. Like
Yeah.
by making fun of the flaws, we're forced to confront them and, consider how to do better.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's keep these qualities of good peer review in mind.
Because in part 3, we're going to explore some real-world examples of peer review, both good and bad, and we'll discuss how we can all contribute to creating a more, supportive and constructive environment for scholarly work. Welcome back to the show. We've had some good laughs talking about crap peer reviews and laying out, what makes for truly helpful feedback. But now let's kind of like zoom out a little.
Yeah, get a bit more big picture.
Exactly. Big picture. So, thinking back to that satirical guide, one thing that really kind of hit me was how it, I don't know, it almost like plays on this power dynamic thing,
Yeah, the power dynamic in peer review, it's definitely there.
Because like you have this expert reviewer with their fancy titles and their AI assistant, and they basically have all this power to decide what's good and bad. I mean, that can be pretty intimidating, right? Especially for like newer researchers who are just, starting out in their careers.
Yeah, it can be really daunting, especially when you're like fresh out of grad school and you're getting your first paper reviewed. You're kind of like, oh gosh, what if they hate it?
Right. What if they think I'm a complete idiot?
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to remember that, peer review at its best, it's not about one person, dictating what's right or wrong. It's really more like a dialogue.
Ooh, I like that. A dialogue.
Yeah, it's about experts engaging in this constructive exchange of ideas,
Yeah.
to help each other improve their work and ultimately to like advance knowledge. It shouldn't feel like a dictatorship.
A dialogue, not a dictatorship.
Yeah.
I love that. So how do we move away from that kind of that expert versus novice dynamic? How do we create a more collaborative peer review culture?
Well, I think mentorship is huge. Like more experienced researchers, they can really help guide newer scholars on the nuances of peer review. They can share their own experiences, offer advice, be a sounding board.
That makes so much sense because it's not like they teach you how to do peer review in grad school, right? It's kind of like this mysterious process that you just sort of, you figure it out as you go.
Yeah, it's a lot of learning by doing, which can be tough. So having those mentors to guide you along the way can make a big difference.
Okay, so mentorship is important. What else? What else can we do to improve the peer review culture?
Well, I think journals also have a big role to play here. Like they can provide really clear guidelines for reviewers.
Right.
Guidelines that emphasize like the importance of constructive feedback and respectful communication.
Yes, because sometimes, you read those reviewer comments and you're like, wow, they really didn't hold back.
Right. And sometimes that kind of harsh feedback, it's not really helpful. It can be like demoralizing for the author.
Exactly. So journals, set the tone. They can say, hey, reviewers, we expect you to be, critical, but also constructive, be respectful.
And I've even heard of some journals experimenting with like different models of peer review. Things like open peer review, where the identities of the reviewers are known.
Oh, interesting. So everyone knows who's giving the feedback.
Or double-blind review, where both the authors and the reviewers are anonymous.
So no one knows who's who.
Exactly. And these approaches, they're trying to address some of the potential biases that can crop up in the traditional single-blind review process.
Oh, right. Because in the traditional model, the author knows who the reviewers are, but the reviewers don't know who the author is.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this potential for biases to creep in. Like if the reviewer knows the author's reputation, it could, subconsciously influence their evaluation of the research.
It's fascinating to see how the peer review system is, kind of like evolving and adapting. There's definitely room for improvement, but it's good to know that people are like thinking critically about these issues and trying to, come up with solutions.
Yeah, I think that's really encouraging. It shows that people care about making the system better.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to remember that, peer review, it's ultimately about ensuring that research is evaluated fairly, that we're, sharing valuable knowledge with the world.
And that the process itself is, it's respectful and it's constructive.
Exactly. So, listeners, whether you're a seasoned researcher or just starting your academic journey, remember that you have a role to play in shaping the future of peer review.
Be the kind of reviewer you would want to have. Be thoughtful, be respectful, and be constructive.
And if you ever find yourself on the receiving end of some less than helpful feedback, well, just remember that hilarious guide we talked about. Sometimes a good laugh is the best way to cope with the absurdities of the academic world.
But beyond the laughter, let's all strive to create a peer review system that is rigorous, fair, and, ultimately serves the pursuit of knowledge.
That's it for our deep dive into the world of peer review. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.